Today's headline is Eileen Strathmore. The subheadline says, Early History of Analostan Island. It says, so much has been written and said lately of scenes during the past 20 years on our beautiful little isle in the Potomac, opposite Georgetown, that friends have persuaded me to give the readers of your valuable paper a chapter of its early history, as related to my grandfather by the Reverend Rufus K. Hartwood, for many years a resident of this city. And offer no doubt could, with the material before me, an old diary left to us by Mr. H., write a very thrilling and romantic story. But having had no experience in that profession, I shall simply state the facts, leaving readers to draw upon their imagination for all that is necessary to make it interesting. Towards the close of the last century, there arrived in Georgetown, per schooner Albatross from Liverpool, an English gentleman accompanied by his wife and 2 daughters. He was unknown here, and from his reticent manner, it was evident he did not care about forming new acquaintances. Arrivals from abroad were not as frequent then as now, and people of an inquisitive nature were considerably disappointed at not being able to learn something of his history. To be sure, there was his name and residence registered at the hotel, Marvin Strathmore and Family, London, England. But that was not sufficient. They wanted to know all about him, and how to get this information was the subject of daily conversation. About a month after his arrival, he purchased the property now known as Analostan Island, and during the 6 months that followed, it was the scene of wonderful transformations. Vessels were dispatched for lumber, upon the arrival of which building commenced at once. Men were put to work, clearing the wild growth of timber, laying out walks and drives, digging a well and cistern, making an ice house, a landing for boats, and such other improvements as the owner desired. The latter part of November, Mr. Strathmore and family took possession of their beautiful home. The dwelling, a 2-story frame, was situated in the center of the island, facing Georgetown. It contained 14 large rooms, quite a number of which were magnificently fitted up with furniture and works of art imported from England. Several outhouses were scattered about the premises. A large barn, unlike anything ever before seen in this part of the country, stood a few hundred yards in the rear of the main building, while directly in front of the dwelling, at the water's edge, was a fine boathouse. Of course, this sudden and seemingly extravagant expenditure of so much money was the topic of general comment. Some called him crazy. Others remarked with a very wise expression that there was something wrong. He undoubtedly was a fugitive from justice, perhaps a forger, defaulter, or swindler. And when he gave orders to the carpenter to build a closed-board fence 12 feet high around the entire island, with only one gate near the boat landing, the majority of those who had been in doubt regarding his character decided at once that he was a criminal of some kind. Occasionally, Mr. S., accompanied by some of his family, would drive in Virginia, but never this side of the river. That he was wealthy, no one could contradict. His horses and yacht were the fastest in the country, and his retinue of servants, most of whom he sent to England for, superior to any ever introduced here. In fact, he seemed to possess everything heart could wish for, or at least that money could command. Judging from his appearance, he was a man about 65 years of age, tall and well proportioned, with fine features, straight hair and full beard, slightly gray. His wife was probably not over 50, a handsome matronly brunette upon whom time and the cares of life evidently had rested lightly. Their youngest child, a girl of perhaps 15, a very pretty little blonde, seemed to be the pet of the family, and a great favorite in the household. Eileen, the oldest daughter, 25 years of age, was unquestionably the most beautiful woman that had ever visited this part of our land. Were I to quote everything that has been published in praise of such famous beauties as Helen of Troy, Zenobia, or Cleopatra, it would fail to portray all the loveliness and charms of this Queen of the Isle, as the people in Georgetown called her. A poet in after years very truthfully described her as one who would change the worship of all climates and make a new religion wherever she comes. Unite the differing faiths of all the world to idolize her face. Her form was fresher than the morning rose when the dew wets its leaves, unstained and pure as is the lily or the mountain snow. Her eyes, her lips, her cheeks, her features seemed to be drawn by love's own hand. Grace was in all her steps, heaven in her smile, in every gesture, dignity and love, and intellect by far superior to us all. Venus herself might well have envied her, for she had charms no other woman ever possessed. One evening in the early part of December, a crowd of men were sitting in the little tavern in Georgetown, awaiting the arrival of the Baltimore stage. As usual, their conversation was confined to the current subject, the Strathmores. Each one in his turn had some startling piece of news as to what had transpired lately on the island. One man was relating what Mrs. So-and-so had heard from somebody's servant, who was well acquainted with the man who helped build Mr. Strathmore's ferry boat. When the coach arrived, there was but one passenger, a man not more than 30, of fair complexion, golden curly hair, heavy mustache, merry blue eyes with long dark lashes, exquisitively curved eyebrows, and in stature above the medium height, erect as an Indian, with every indication of Herculean strength. The people stepped aside as he walked up to the register and wrote in a plain bold hand, Carlos Savoy, Twickenham Park, England. After supper, he remarked to the landlord, I understand a gentleman by the name of Strathmore has purchased property in your neighborhood. Can you tell me where it is situated and the nearest road by which I can reach it? The landlord answered his question, delighted at the thought that at last he had met someone who could and would give reliable information regarding the owner of the isle. But much to his disgust, Mr. Savoy, after thanking him, merely asked that he be called early and went to his room. The following morning, he proceeded to the island, where he remained until nearly dark. After the guests had all retired that night, he inquired of the landlord if he knew of anyone who understood the Indian language, as spoken by a tribe called the Analostans, and upon being informed that he had a half-breed in his employ who often acted as interpreter, Mr. Savoy continued, Can I see him tonight? Certainly you can. I'll go and call him. And with that the proprietor bowed himself out of the door. Upon his return, there came with him the half-breed, who at Mr. Savoy's request followed him to his room. What took place there during the 2 hours they were in conversation, the landlord tried in vain to find out. All his servant would tell him was that the white man made him promise to keep his mouth closed for 1 week, and that if he did as he was told, he would get big money, plenty gold. Before sunrise the next morning, the interpreter and the stranger drove to the camp of the Analostans, about a mile west of Georgetown, on the banks of the Potomac. Here they remained several hours, talking with the chief of the tribe. During the 10 days that followed, Mr. Savoy remained at the hotel, talking with no one and exhibiting no interest in anything or any person except the interpreter. In company with him, he would drive to the Indian camp every night, often not returning until nearly daybreak. The afternoon of the 11th day, an Indian sauntered into the hotel and inquired for the half-breed, who after a few words with him, took him to the Englishman's apartments. That night was one probably never forgotten by the old residents of Georgetown. Soon after dark, a servant informed the landlord that Mr. Savoy wished to see him in his room. Upon entering, he was requested to take a seat near the fireplace, while his guest, after locking the door, drew a chair close to his and in a low tone inquired, Can you keep a secret? I reckon I can if I choose. Suppose I was to loan you £100 without security for an indefinite period. Would that strengthen your resolution to keep my secret? Well, stranger, times is pretty hard just now. I think it would. Promise me, then, that you will, so far as lies in your power, do everything I ask tonight, and that what I'm about to tell you shall not be spoken of by you for 1 month. I swear, replied the landlord, clapping his right hand over his heart and holding the left high in the air. Now, continued Mr. Savoy, tell me first, is there a minister or priest between here and Alexandria, near the main road? None that I knows of, except the one to Falls Church a little more than 5 miles out of your way. Very well. I want a carriage, the best you have, with 2 of your fastest horses, to meet me at precisely 11 o'clock tonight on the opposite side of the river at the little blacksmith shop. Don't let the driver come a minute before the time. I will be there with a lady. I shall then drive to the church, and from there to Alexandria, where you can send for your team tomorrow. Can I depend upon you? You certainly can, stranger, but you ain't told me that air secret yet. My good man, you have heard all the secret I care to tell you. See that you keep your word to me, and here's the proof that I will keep mine. And Mr. Savoy took from his valise the promised £100 and handed it to him. At exactly 11 o'clock, the carriage was at the blacksmith shop, and so was Eileen Strathmore and Carlos Savoy. They drove to the rector's house, near the old church, were married, and then proceeded to Alexandria, where a vessel was waiting to take them to Boston. Just before daylight, the cry of fire was heard coming across the river, and the people on this side soon beheld a sight never before or since seen there. Every building and the fence were in a blaze. Boats were once filled with strong, brave men, who upon reaching the island used every effort to extinguish the flames, but without success. From the half-breed, it was learned that Mr. Savoy had employed an Indian to deliver a letter to Miss Eileen. He was to bring an answer, but he failed to return. A second messenger was sent by the chief, and he also was never seen again. A third was dispatched and so on until 9 had gone, and none came back. When the chief himself found a way to deliver a note and returned with a reply, unseen in safety. They now had their revenge. 9 of their best warriors had been killed by or through the orders of Mr. Strathmore. To burn them out seemed to them their duty, and they did it. The family remained in Georgetown until the island was sold, when they returned to England. From Mr. Hartwood's diary, I find that several years before Mr. Strathmore came to this country, his daughter Eileen was engaged to Mr. Savoy, the only son of a wealthy London banker. But a few weeks before the marriage was to have taken place, Mr. Strathmore became insane upon that one subject. His mania was that she should marry a member of the royal family or remain single. He would not listen to reason, and his physicians advised him to travel. This he did, pleased with the idea that he had broken off the engagement forever. The fire on the island, together with the loss of his beautiful daughter, seemed to have the effect of completely curing him. For in less than a year after his return home, he advertised in every country for Mr. Savoy and his wife, promising to do everything in his power to make them happy if they would come back to London and remain during his life. They were only too glad to accept his invitation, and after their reunion, a happier family could not have been found in all England. This story came from the great District of Columbia, being reported in the Washington Evening Star of April 25th, 1881. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.